So you've done your national service, you've done a few years at Butlins, you've got married, we're now into the sort of early to mid 60s. Where did life take you then?
6 years at Butlins. I did 6 years Butlins. Eventually I became permanent staff where I could work the winter as well. And in the winter you would go to the Butlin hotels. They had hotels in Brighton, Blackpool and Margate. So I did them all. And eventually it was in Brighton that I met Jimmy Tarbuck, because I left for the summer season in 1961 and Jimmy took over my bed virtually. He moved into the same bedroom that I'd had at the ocean. I remember Jim saying to me, because it was Saturday night, I'll never forget, and I was leaving on the Sunday and he was taking over as sort of the comic compere. And he said to me, "You don't have to do all that, do you? What, I said, compere and do an act and do the old time musical and then do a sing along at the end of the." I said, "Yeah, that's what you got to do as a redcoat." But the boss was the entertainment director was a man called Colonel Basil Brown, and he'd been an entertainment or directing entertainment for ENSA, and that's why Billy Butlin employed him, because everybody was coming out of the army, you know, in the 40s, and he employed people that he knew, you know, could do the job. He was there, hello, what do you do? One of those, you know. But it was the people around him who ran the camps, people like Frank Mansell, who was my very first mentor. He gave me the job at Skegness, and he went on to give me some wonderful advice. Most of my life, really, he was a marvellous mentor.
What was the difference between playing the hotels and playing the camps?
Well, the camps were huge, of course. They would have 9,000 people a week. So you'd be working to audiences of 2,000. I mean, in the hotels, it was more intimate cabaret, really. Although they did have little theatres. In Margate, they had a nice little theatre in one of the hotels. And Blackpool, they had a nice little theatre where you put the seats out for them and a little stage and everything. Well, they tried to do it as theatrically as they could. It was still invaluable experience to be doing it, of course.
So why did you leave after 6 years?
Wasn't getting enough money. You know, the thing about Butlins was that you did the job, but you lived in, so that was part of your salary. I mean, it was fine if you were a single guy, but I'd got married in 1961, I had a child, and it was just couldn't exist, really. There wasn't enough money. And it was Frank who said to me, "You know, you've got your act together now, why don't you go and sort of take it on the road," sort of thing. And he encouraged me to leave. So I did. In 1963, I left, went to live in Blackpool because it seemed to be a good centre of entertainment. There was a possible chance that I might get a summer season there. And it wasn't far from Manchester, wasn't far from Liverpool, Newcastle. We're all within easy spitting distance for work. And it so happened that I got an agent in Liverpool, a fellow called Mike Hughes, who really had a great idea. He thought that if he was only to handle comedians, everybody wanted a comic on the bill. There isn't a variety bill going that doesn't have a comic. He had a great pal of his called Ricky McCabe, who was a redcoat and a friend of mine. And he used to go out with Ricky when he would do clubs. And in fact, it was Ricky at the Metropole Blackpool who said to me, "Give this fella Mike Hughes a ring, and he fixes comics in clubs in Liverpool." And he got known for comics. Mike Hughes finished up handling Russ Abbott, Freddie Starr, myself, Johnny Hackett, Ray Fell, all the comics, you know, literally, and a few magicians. And really, it made him a fortune, because he hit the nail right on the head. And it was just at the time of the Beatles, 1963, 64, 65. So we were all, you know, for want of a better word, hot. And as soon as I went with Mike, he fixed me from there on. And I just never looked back. I mean, within 10 months, I was on television doing Opportunity Knocks.
So you're honing your act and suddenly you get put on Opportunity Knocks. What was the act that you took on there?
Well, when I left Butlins in 1963, I had an act. I'd been doing an act at Butlins. I got myself together, sort of, because I was doing clubs. I mean, I had to. But I realised I had to do something a bit different. Oddly enough, the first week I worked out of Butlins was at a club in Barrow-in-Furness called the 99 Club. Quite a nice cabaret room, actually. And there was a compere on the bill called Tommy Halfpenny. He said to me, I remember on the Saturday night, he said, I see you was on the Palladium tomorrow night. So I said, no. He said, Jimmy Tarbuck. I said, what? He said, Jimmy Tarbuck's on Sunday night at the Palladium. Well, I saw him do it and I thought he was great. You know, he really was. He was cheeky, he was modern, young, and he looked good on television, all those things going for him. But I realized very quickly that I got to get my finger out and I got to do something a bit different. So I was actively searching for something, and I don't know what it was. I didn't know what it was until one night I worked at a club in Manchester called the Northern Sporting Club, which was a huge cabaret venue. It had been an Odeon cinema. Absolutely, it held 2,000 people on the Saturday and Sunday night. Absolutely huge. But during the week was empty. When I say empty, 6 or 7 tables. That looks empty in a room that big. But they sat them around the front and you could entertain them. And if you got away with it, you get away with it. And I was getting myself, I was getting used to working Manchester, used to the people. I could talk the language. And working a particular night, and a woman out of the audience shouted out, tell us a joke about a budgie. No word of a lie. So, as they would shout out in northern clubs. And I had a hat with me, a Homburg hat, and I pulled it down over my ears, and I made the joke, which was an old joke, into a 2-character gag. Whereas the guy going in the pet shop, asking the fella about buying a budgie, and the guy behind the counter. The guy behind the counter, I took the hat off. And it made it, and it just enhanced the joke. And it went very well, and it went so well that I did it the following night, but just as a gag.
Do the gag?
The guy goes into the pet shop, and he says, with the hat on, he said, "Come here, Parrot Face. I'm just about to stick up to here, because you sold me a budgie and it won't speak." And he keeps going back every day for a week, and the budgie still doesn't speak. And he sells him a swing and a ladder and a little mirror for the budgie, everything he sells him, and it still won't speak. And at the end of the week, he said to the fella, "It still hasn't spoken." And the guy said, "But it's dead." So he said, "The budgie's dead." He said, "Did it say anything before he died?" He said, "Yes. Hasn't that fella sold you any birdseed?" Which was the original gag. It's a funny gag. It always was a funny gag. But it wasn't a new gag, it was an old gag. But I sort of enhanced it with doing the 2 characters. And I became known in that little area of Manchester and Liverpool as this funny guy with a hat on. Right, so I was getting sort of established just doing that one joke.
You were known as the man with the hat.
Yeah.
And how did the man with the hat become the character Samuel Tweed?
Frank Mansell got me a job, would you believe, in Dunoon with a friend of his called Archie McCulloch, who was a Scottish entrepreneur. And Archie McCulloch needed a Redcoat type character to run an open air theatre, little open air venue on the front in Dunoon, so that he could put in discotheques on the Clyde coast, because discos were all coming in 1964. So the council said, if you put something in this little open air theatre for us, so he wanted like a little Redcoat character. So Frank recommended me. I went up there. I was getting 40 quid a week to do 2 shows a day, 11 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. Well, most of the time it was rained off, so I couldn't actually perform. And the rest of the time it was me, a pianist called Tom, who sat in a Mac and a cloth cap at the piano, 3 drunks and a wet dog. That was it. And the show was called Fun with Freddie. And it wasn't. It was, you'll see from the poster how tatty it was and how tatty it looked. It was just awful. I wouldn't have minded if I could have actually got on there and done something, because I had fun and games for the kids and get people up and audience participation. All the things I've been doing at Butlins, which were a doddle. but I couldn't perform. But I lasted 2 weeks. And it so happens I had to go back down to Manchester to do a radio show. I'd done a couple of radio programmes, but wasn't allowed to lisp because it was an affliction. BBC said, no lisping. Lisping, you see. So I go down back to Manchester and do this radio show on a Sunday. And I said to my wife, who was still in this little flat in Blackpool, I said, you know, darling, I really can't go back. It's just soul destroying. So I called Archie McCulloch and I said, Archie, it is just not working. A, I can't entertain them, and B, the weather's not right for working outside. It really isn't. It was an open air theatre, you know, a little wall, 2-foot wall. So I'm out of work. I'm back home in Blackpool, out of work. I called my Hughes, my agent, and he said, well, you're supposed to be away for 8 weeks. I haven't fixed you anything. So what am I going to do? Anyway, one or two things came in very quickly. People had fallen ill or been paid off in clubs, and I got one or two bits and bobs. But the one thing that came in that stuck out was this audition for Opportunity Knocks, which I hadn't really heard of because it had only been on a couple of weeks on a Saturday night. And it was, I have to say, with respect to what Knocks, what became, then the first 2 episodes were quite amateurish because they'd rushed this programme on. Apparently they had Huey Green for 7 shows, and they did a pilot for a thing called Green for Danger, and it didn't work. But he's still in for 7 shows. So Huey had said, I got a show I used to do on the radio called Opportunity Knocks. So they put it on, rushed it on, and they were trying to get people for it. I went down to see the producer, a fellow called Peter Dulay, and he said, I've heard about you, he said, with the hat, but I don't want you to audition cold without an audience. Can I see you work in front of an audience? And I thought, well, where can you see me work? Well, I was doing a gig on the Friday night at a little club called the Candlelight Club in Oldham. And it was quite a nice little cabaret club. So I said, the Candlelight Club in Oldham. So he said, what time do you go on? I said, well, what time can you get there? He said, well, I finished rehearsals for this week's show on Friday at 9 o'clock. We do the show on a Saturday afternoon. He said, so I can be there 9:30, 10 o'clock. I said, I'll make sure I'm on at 10. So I rang the manager and he said, of course you can go on at 10, Freddie. So I turned up at 9:30 and he was there with his secretary, sitting out front. I go on and do my act, do the thing with the hat, and he was in the dressing room when I came off. And he said, I love the thing you did with the hat. He said, that would work on television, you know, because it's just a head, talking head, which is what TV is, talking head. So I said, you're going to put me in tomorrow? He said, yeah. I said, just like that. He said, just like that. So why? He said, I don't want somebody else to get you first. That's what he said to me. I mean, in those days, we're looking at 17, 20 odd million viewers, you know. There was only 3 channels then. And it was just enormous, just huge. I did well on it. I mean, television audiences are usually good anyway. I mean, theatre audiences are always much better than, you know, club audiences. Much more receptive. They're all facing you and you've got their attention.
And they haven't paid to be in there.
And they haven't paid to be.
And they enjoy the lights and the cameras.
That's right. And it was just very good. And that evening, that Saturday evening, as the show went out, I was at a working men's club in St Helens. And when I went on, I was a star because I'd just been on television within half an hour. And that was it. And then I went on to do a midnight show in Liverpool and then home. And I never looked back. Never looked back for 20 years. Never stopped working. Never had to worry where the next penny was coming from. It was just tremendous. It went on and got better and better. I mean, I had a problem in as much as I had to find new material for the character. So I had writers writing stuff for me and what have you. But it was just from that one performance, that 4 minutes.
The name Samuel Tweet and Parrot Face Davies, where did these names come from?
Well, the Samuel Tweet was, we had to give him a name, right? And it was Samuel Tweet. It was quite you know, nice. And oddly enough, I'll tell you about the name Samuel. I was in a radio series for this producer who told me I couldn't lisp. So a few years later, he booked me for when we do a TV series called The Golden Parrot Club. And this guy with the lisp is in all the time, barracking the acts, right? Freddie Parrot Face Davies, it should never have been. In the old days of variety, people would have what they call bill matter. So it would be the name of the act, and underneath, sort of one word or two words, like if you were a dance act, a tap dance act, it would say McAndrews and Mills hot feet. That would be like bill matter, you see. And if you were a trapeze act, you know, with the Skylons, you know, swinging for joy or whatever, they would be called bill matter. I wanted a word so that people would know it was the man with the hat. So it should have been Freddie Davies, and underneath in small letters, Parrot Face, because that's the name I called the guy in the shop. I thought, and they put Parrot Face and said, oh, that's the guy with the... Because usually posters didn't have photographs on. They mainly do now, but they didn't used to. And some printer on a poster put the Parrot Face word in the middle of the name. He put Freddie Parrot Face Davies, and it stuck. And you know, people got to know me as that, so I just let it ride.
And you had your own television series, The
Yes.
Small World of Samuel Tweet.
The Small World of Samuel Tweet, yeah. We couldn't think of a name for it, really. I came up with the name of The Small World of Samuel Tweet because he was working in a pet shop. He ran his pet shop, and it was the small animals in the pet shop, you know.
And this is for children, effectively
It
children's
was for
television.
children's television, yeah. I think we did two series,
Mid-70s.
74 and 75.
Yeah. So you were saying before about when you grew up and your childhood memories of entertainers and so on. But for me, so when I'm growing up, I remember shows like this.
You've no concept of people watching it. You're talking in a room like you don't think anybody's going to watch it. And when people do, in their hundreds and thousands, hopefully they will. But you don't have any concept. I mean, if you walked on the Palladium and thought there were 20 million people watching you, you wouldn't be able to do it.